What is up, everybody? I'm Michelle Margaux. Welcome to Mets Off Day Live, coming at you from Coney Island, where I'm spending this off day visiting some of the Mets prospects with the Brooklyn Cyclones that we will definitely be talking about during this show today. I'm joined by Licata, host of SNY's Baseball Night in New York. You can also find him on The Fan, weekdays 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. with Brandon Tierney. And on the other side of the screen is a friend of ours, Tim Healey, who covers the Mets for Newsday. Hello, guys.
Hello.
So we usually start the show by looking at what some of the Mets players did on their last off day. But since that was the day before the trade deadline, we are going to trade that segment away this week and just get right into it. So obviously the Mets have lost some games and lost some players since the last show. The organization has made a major pivot to focus on the future. So we're going to do the same. But Sal, let's talk about how you're feeling about the Mets today.
I'm not going to get into my feelings about that. I try to avoid my feelings, Michelle. I can't, because if I start to think about my feelings, I start to get upset, depressed, angry at times. So for me, I've come to the realization, and we've talked about this at work a while ago, like this team, they were dead a while ago, unfortunately. I've come to grips with that. I've accepted it, and I've kind of moved on, and I'll be hopeful and excited about the future. But right now, my feelings are gone for 2023.
I'm glad that you recognize that this is a safe space and you can tell us how you feel. Tim, obviously covering the trade deadline was a crazy couple days for all of us, but what is the vibe in the clubhouse right now?
It's not great. I think a lot of the veteran players are still trying to adjust to their new reality, because guys like McNeil, Alonso, Nimmo, they're in the primes of their career, and they thought this was going to be a huge season, and it is not. So really, it's just a wasted year. And more and more every day, the clubhouse is filled with guys who are just happy to be there. Jimmy Yacobonis is back. Abraham Almonte, who's a player, he's up from AAA after having a good season with Syracuse. And the lineup is filled. The bullpen is filled with dudes who are either trying to impress Mets decision makers, trying to improve their odds for 2024, or just impress literally anybody in baseball so that they maybe have a job somewhere come spring training. So it's a rough mix in the clubhouse right now.
Well, looking back at the trades, we're going to play a game called Yay, Nay, or Meh. So we're going to do a simple yay, nay, or meh for each one of the trades on how you feel. So, Sal, we're going to start with you. The Mets traded Eduardo Escobar for Coleman Crowe and Landon Marceau. Yay, nay, or meh?
Meh. I had no feelings with that. I mean, I understood it. I was disappointed in Escobar, the way that he panned out. He had a bad first year. I thought he was going to bounce back for sure this year. Disappointed, but it was a meh move for me.
Okay. Tim, David Robertson for Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez.
I thought it was meh. I was surprised that they did that trade as early as they did, 4 days before the deadline. Obviously, they had a lot of pieces to move, so I get wanting to get one out of the way. But I wonder what they could have gotten if they'd waited and had a desperate contender come looking for David Robertson.
Well, this was the big shoe to drop. Sal, Max Scherzer for Luis Angel Acuna.
Yay! I mean, I still can't believe Billy Epler should be taking bows for this one. I still cannot believe the Mets were able to trade Max Scherzer, number one, save $22 million, number two, and get back a top prospect. Like, it blows my mind. Max Scherzer. Apparently, the Texas Rangers do not watch Baseball Night in New York, or frankly, SNY. Like, are they not watching the Mets games? Max Scherzer is done. The fact that they would take him on and give up a top prospect, I loved it. I would have done that trade and been buyers if I'm the Mets, as far as not trading Robertson or Verlander. The Scherzer trade, to me, that was 100% yay.
What do you think, Tim, on that one?
I thought it was – I was not surprised. I did not share Sal's feelings about being able to move Scherzer. It was good that the Mets got a good prospect for him, but the saving $22 million thing just doesn't add up, because really they paid $35 million for the ability to acquire Luis Angel Acuna, brother of Ronald Acuna Jr., of course. So it was a good trade. But it was, I'm not surprised they're able to move Scherzer because he's been excellent for the Rangers, and they're trying to make a playoff push, and he's going to help.
So does that fall under the yay category?
I call it a yay, but not quite as enthusiastically as Sal.
Okay. Nothing's ever as enthusiastic as Sal.
Well, that is true. That is true, Michelle, as you know. But to me, it's one of the great trades in the history of the Mets. I don't care what he does with Texas. And Tim, I understand your point about the money, but it was a sunk cost. That money was gone. So the fact that you could save 22 mil and get a prospect back for a guy who was never going to do it here, that's why I'm over excited about it.
So, Tim, what about Verlander for Drew Gilbert and Ryan Clifford, the two outfielders?
This to me was the biggest yay, because if the ship has sailed on the Scherzer Verlander saga for the Mets, to get two prospects of their caliber back for Scherzer, that's big. Drew Gilbert is the more highly regarded one for now. Saw him the other day with Binghamton. He's very small, very fast. I'll be interested to see how he develops. But Ryan Clifford, who you're going to see, Michelle, tonight in Brooklyn if they play, might end up being the better player. He's a big guy, a lot of power, and that sounds like a very, very tempting player in a year or two.
Sal, what about you? Yay, nay, or meh?
I'm probably going to go meh. So in the beginning, I was nay on this. I hated the idea of trading Verlander because it's given up not only in this season, but more importantly, they don't have an ace next season. And I trust that Verlander could be that. Then a part of me was like, all right, well, what the hell? You traded Scherzer, you traded Robertson, stockpile the foreign prospects, well, as yay. But ultimately, I'm kind of mad because it not only took away this season, it changes things next season. And I don't trust that all these prospects are going to pan out. I'm excited and hopeful about it, but they gave up a known commodity in an ace in Verlander. So I'd probably go meh. I'm in between on it.
Yay, nay, or meh for Mark Canha for Justin Jarvis?
Meh for me. I mean, who cares at that point? Mark Canha. And I like Mark Canha. Good dude. I think he's a perfect guy to have as a complimentary piece on a winning ball club. The Mets are not that. Get what you can for him because obviously there's no use with him here.
Tim, what do you think?
I think it's a yay in context. The Mets didn't need Canha. They weren't going to pick up his club option next year. May as well get a little something for him, and that's what Jarvis is. Just a controllable, maybe starter, maybe bullpen, long reliever type of guy. They got something for a player they didn't need, so it's a yay.
I feel like these are all relative too, because after Verlander and Scherzer go, then it's like everything else is kind of like what? Okay, right. What about Tommy Pham for Jeremy Rodriguez, Tim?
Again, it's a relative yay because Jeremy Rodriguez is 17 years old and hasn't really done anything in pro ball. Not much of a prospect for now, but he did get a good-sized bonus, a 7-figure bonus from the Diamondbacks not too long ago. So there's something there that teams see. So again, because the Mets didn't need Tommy Pham, they had no use for Tommy Pham, may as well get something for him. And the Mets have gotten rid of a lot of these lottery ticket type prospects in recent years. Sometimes they pan out. Usually they don't. We'll see what happens with this one, Rodriguez.
Sal, Tommy Pham.
Yeah, I'd say yay for that reason. Like I don't. You're trading Tommy Pham, whatever, insignificant, but maybe one of these guys, Michelle, of all the guys they brought in, of the top guys in the Scherzer and the Verlander trade, you want maybe 2 of the 3 to hit. And in the other trades, you're looking for one, whether it's the Canha trade, the Tommy Pham trade, Escobar, whatever. Like, you want one somewhat productive player. So, yeah, I'd say yay because they sold high on a player who's ultimately useless for them this year and moving forward irrelevant.
Okay, last but not least, the most groundbreaking trade they made, Dominic Leone for Jeremiah Jackson.
I barely know either of those guys. I mean, come on. That is at the end of the deadline. Come on, meh for me.
Tim,
this is a yay because Dominic Leone. That they got anything for Dominic Leone. That some team wanted to acquire Dominic Leone, who is a perfectly pleasant guy, is got to be a win. Jeremiah Jackson actually has some sneaky power as a utility infielder in AA this year, so you never know. He was a Billy Epler draft pick with the Angels in 2018, so clearly Epler likes the player, acquiring him for a second time.
Yeah.
See what happens.
All All right, we're going to switch gears. We have a fan question from Emily from YouTube. She said, do you think we'll see Mike Vasil start in the majors this year, Tim?
I don't think so. No. He had an excellent start the other day for AAA Syracuse, carrying a no-hitter into the 9th inning, which was great because his adjustment to Syracuse has not been particularly smooth. There's, a month and change, 5 or 6 weeks to go in the season in the minors. So let him keep going down there. I don't think we'll see him this year, but he's very much going to be in the conversation in 2024.
Sal, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect to see him up here. I think we get, and fans get in particular, so excited about who's next, about these prospects. Let this year be a lesson. Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, same thing with Mauricio, and now Vasil. It's going to be about, bring these guys up. Just because we're not watching them at the major leagues doesn't mean that the team isn't watching them. So I'll trust Billy Epler and the Mets organization on what they do with Vasil. Would I like to see him up here? Sure. I do not expect to see him before the end of the year.
Okay, so I want to go back to the trade situation again. Tim, what did you think of Scherzer airing out the details of his conversations with the Mets front office?
I thought it was great. I have to give Max Scherzer a lot of credit because he gets asked a question, which is not necessarily the easiest question to answer, and he's honest. And I don't know how I or really anybody could possibly criticize a guy for being honest. Mets fans know more about the Mets' plans for the next few years thanks to Max Scherzer. If Max Scherzer didn't say what he said, reveal what he did about his conversations with Steve Cohen and Billy Epler, who knows what version of anything Mets decision makers try to spin publicly. So I give Max Scherzer a lot of credit. He did the right thing.
Sal, I know you're.
I don't care.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Michelle. Go ahead.
Well, I was just... Go ahead. I was going to say, I know that you're a little salty with the way that Scherzer pitched in the playoffs, and I've heard you talk many a times about Scherzer, but I want to have you take a step back. Looking at his time with the Mets overall, what are your thoughts on Scherzer's time?
I love the signing. I think it was an important signing, and I would do it over again. But it was a failure. There's no other way to put it. And look, I respect Max Scherzer for being honest. However, in turn, if Max Scherzer comes to me and I'm Billy Epler or Steve Cohen and says, what are our plans for competing next year? I'd be like, dude, you are the reason we're in this spot. Like you're asking me, I'm Steve Cohen now. You're asking me if I'm going to be all in next year. Let me ask you, what are you going to do? Are you not going to get suspended? Are you going to stay healthy? Are you going to pitch the way you did in Washington? Like it's the same thing with Verlander. You're asking me if we're all in. You guys are the reason we're in this spot. That's my issue with Scherzer. Every big spot, last year, this year, he failed. He should apologize to Steve Cohen instead of talking about what the plans are for next year. Like, where do you get off asking if the Mets are all in? They were all in. Max Scherzer was an all-in move. He failed at his job. So this is not a Mets problem. This is a Max Scherzer problem. But it was a good signing at the time. They had to do it. It just didn't work out. It happens.
I think that the Mets are better for having Max Scherzer on that team based on the way that he went about his business and based on what the players learned from him and being around him, especially the younger guys. And even Jacob deGrom when he was with the team last year. But Tim, we have another fan question from Magic Ray on YouTube. What do you see among the players that is encouraging?
Like on this roster, what is encouraging? Francisco Alvarez is encouraging. Kodai Senga is encouraging. You know, it's you really kind of it takes some stretching to find anything encouraging out of this season. I think if you want to look at some really small samples in unsexy job competitions, what we've seen from Grant Hartwig and Josh Walker lately is encouraging in a trying to figure out the bullpen for the future way. But the whole problem is there is not a lot encouraging that has happened.
Sal, do you agree?
I'm encouraged that, first of all, the number one thing that you should be encouraged with if you're a Mets fan is Steve Cohen. He is not. Now, there's a difference between going all in and building a legitimate winner and contender each and every year. I trust Steve Cohen. I believe in Steve. Not to mention that they have Nimmo, Lindor, Alonso, Alvarez. Those are all things to be encouraged about. The pitching is going to be a problem. I mean, they're going to have to address that and figure out which way they want to go and spend the money and acquire pitching. But this is not the end of the world here. It's a bad season. It didn't go as according to plan, unfortunately, which is all too familiar with Met fans. They will be just fine.
Let's take a look at 2024. Tim, do you actually believe that the Mets are punting 2024? Do you think they're going to do enough in free agency, at least to compete for a wild card spot?
Punt is way too strong of a word. They're not punting. The Steve Cohen Mets can never punt. That would just be an unacceptable approach. I don't think they're going to try to win the division, though. I think last year, all Buck Showalter and the players talked about was beat the other 4 teams in the division, win the division, and then see what happens next. There's been no talk of that this year. There's not going to be any talk of that next year. Francisco Lindor last week in Kansas City was talking about surprising people and winning 83 to 87 games and sneaking into a wild card, which frankly is embarrassing for the Mets to have as a goal, but that's going to be their reality in 2024. They have to add via free agency. I don't think the Mets say straight up they're not going to go all in. They're not going to spend as much as they've spent the last couple of years, so they're not going to be the Scherzer, Verlander type of splashes, but they still need to spend in free agency because they have huge holes on this roster for 2024, and they at least need to pretend. I also want to note that the word that Cohen and Epler have used is competitive. They want the Mets to be competitive. Semantically, competitive is a very low bar. These Mets right now go on the field and compete every day, technically. So, they will be spending in free agency, just not as much as usual.
I think maybe I'm going out on a limb here. I think they will be more than competitive in 2024 because when you throw guys like that in the fire, they have no choice but to perform, in my opinion, and especially if you supplement that with free agents in the offseason. But Sal, do you believe in the plan here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the exact plan is just yet for the Mets next year, but I know that they're going to have one. This is not – so when they talk about rebuilding and stripping it down and, fans are scarred from what's happened in years prior, it's different now. They are going to be repurposing Steve Cohen's assets. They've already done that. They're going to field a team that can get to the postseason. And if you get to the postseason, anything can happen. Think Philadelphia Phillies a year ago. I know it's the popular example, but it did happen. They won 87 games. They got in. They went to the World Series. The Mets on paper will not be as good as they were coming into this year. In reality, they will be better. It will be different. There won't be as many stars, but they will be a better team, a more competitive team in 2024.
Do you think they make the playoffs?
I do. I mean, I think they make – it's hard not to make the playoffs, Michelle. Even now, this team still mathematically, they gave up all their best players. They still technically are in it. It is hard not to make the postseason. I would be shocked and crushed and angry if the Mets do not make the postseason next year.
All right, we have a fan question from Matt from YouTube. Would other free agents view the Mets differently after trading away top players? Tim?
I don't think they necessarily will because the Mets, thanks to Max Scherzer, are a little more transparent about their plan. The veterans who are still near the top of their game and are taking short-term deals and are prioritizing winning, they might not get those guys next year. They might not get the David Robertson. But overall, money is money. And when Steve Cohen offers more than anybody else, then that's still going to matter the most.
Do you think that if the Mets do hire a president of baseball ops, whether that's David Stearns or somebody else, do you see other major changes coming to the front office, Tim?
It's an interesting one because the way Steve Cohen allowed Billy Epler to operate at the trade deadline is a huge vote of confidence that Cohen does want Epler around for the long haul with the organization. But when it comes down to it, if and when Steve Cohen does hire a president of baseball operations, it'll be up to that guy what the front office looks like. And almost always when a new baseball boss comes in, there are changes to some degree. So whether that's the front office, whether that's manager and other parts of the roster, we'll see. But, it's not just one hire and everything else stays as is. There will be other changes.
Sal, I know it's a long shot, but do you think that the Mets have a chance to sign Shohei Ohtani, or do you think they'll even try to sign Shohei Ohtani?
I mean, I think they'll try as far as inquire about his interest. I do not think it's realistic. And for a while, Michelle, I've been saying all season long and then even in season that I would be stunned if Steve Cohen was not the highest bidder for Shohei Ohtani. That's changed. That is not going to be the case anymore. Now I'd be stunned if he were a Met. He doesn't want the East Coast. That's what you hear. He wants to play for a winner. The Mets provide neither. They're not on the West Coast, and they have not been a winner. So I'd be stunned at this point. I think they'll do their due diligence just to make sure, but it's not realistic. Ohtani's not coming to the Mets.
We do have another fan question. It's from Joel from YouTube. He said, what's going to happen with Ronny Mauricio? Tim?
I think that's up to Ronny Mauricio. He has not been playing well in AAA Syracuse. His hitting has taken a big step back relative to early this season. His defense, he's trying to figure out multiple positions, shortstop, second base, left field. And the Mets have just decided pretty comfortably that he is not ready right now. So does he make it to the majors this year? I wouldn't surprise me if we see him by the end. But he's not going. I don't think he'll figure significantly into their 2024 plans at the outset. He's going to have to force his way in there, which he's fully capable of doing.
Sal, who would you like to see the Mets sign this offseason?
I mean, I want pitching, and I don't want David Price. I don't even love Aaron Nola. I mean, I know I'm knocking guys off. Yamamoto would be the one guy that would intrigue me, the same way that Kodai Senga did. So if the hype around him is legit, or if he's close to that, maybe they could get a good value there. Bottom line is, I want pitching, and I definitely don't want, what do they say, David Price? I meant Blake Snell. I definitely don't want Blake Snell. Those two guys, Snell and Nola, I know are going to be two guys atop the free agent list, but I don't want either of those guys.
Yeah, when you said David Price, I was just going to let it go.
Well, you got to call me out on that. That's your job.
No,
in my mind, I don't know why I said that, but
well,
Snell,
they both played for the Rays. I don't really know.
Yeah.
So let's talk Pete Alonso. We haven't really talked about him at all. He's been on a home run tear as of late. Tim, what do you see as his future with the Mets or not with the Mets?
What do I see, or what do I think they should do?
Whichever one you want to answer.
Well, what I think they should do is sign Pete Alonso forever, because he is the best power hitter they have ever had. Never mind had in a homegrown way. So they should just give him a huge contract and lock him up and make him a forever Met and let him crush all the Mets records and then some. And, have first base and then DH locked up for 6 to 8 to 10 years. So that's what I think they should do. What I think they probably will do is at least listen on trades this offseason and then let him go to free agency if that's what he wants next offseason, and then sign him. Because Steve Cohen, as we've seen, he's made plenty of decisions that have not turned out well, but he's no dummy. He knows what an obvious decision this is, and he's been very good at making the right obvious decisions through his 3 years as Mets owner.
Sal, if you were making a decision, what would you do with Pete?
There's no way they could trade Alonso. Maybe the reason why they had him on the block was to see what type of young pitching maybe they could get back for him. But even then, they'd be idiots to trade Alonso. I mean, the guy has consistent power, which is something that's impossible to find. Look across the sport. Nobody in Mets history has had 4 straight seasons with 35 or more home runs. Nobody has had more home runs since Pete Alonso has come into the league in 2019 than him. I mean, I'm not saying he's going to be the first baseman long term, and I'm not saying you got to pay him whatever he wants. If I'm Alonso, I'm close enough to where I'm playing this out in free agency, and maybe it goes the way that it did with Brandon Nimmo. The Mets should let him go to free agency too. All right, see what you do with free agency. Go out there, test the market, come back to us, and if it's the right price, we'll do it. It's got to be something around $200 million, similar to what Matt Olson got. But Pete Alonso has to be a lifelong Met. I don't understand how, if they lose him, trade, free agency, how you could ever replace that.
Do you think it's going to be resolved before the start of the season next year?
Well, I wouldn't if I'm Alonso. I think it's a great question. I would say no right now to that, Michelle. I think the Mets are in a position of power, being that, like, the Braves have to lock all these young guys up because they can't afford them when they hit free agency. The Mets can. They can wait to see if the market develops for Nimmo and then pay him. They could wait to see what happens with Alonso, how many other teams are going to be in on him, and where that ticket goes, how high the ticket price goes on Alonso. So I think the Mets are in a position of power here. I would just let it play out and see what the market says and then pay him accordingly.
We have another fan question from Bob Hunt from YouTube. He said, will Buck Showalter be back next year, Tim?
Good question. Probably not. As you know, we were talking about earlier with the whole president of baseball operations thing, that is the big unknown. And until that question is resolved in October or November, we won't really know what's going on with the rest of it. But also, Steve Cohen last week, in talking about Showalter and Epler, there was not the strongest vote of confidence on the manager. Steve Cohen did say he doesn't put it on the manager. He puts it on the players. Buck has done a good job, all that stuff. And then when asked if he's coming back next year, Steve Cohen said, well, he has a contract. And when I said contracts don't really mean anything, Steve Cohen said, well, I can't predict the future. So, you know, he didn't say yes. And I think the reason he didn't say yes outright is because he knows he has to leave that decision to the smart, talented person he wants to hire to run his baseball operations department.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Also, Buck has to want to be back as well, which I'm sure he does, but you never know. It's a lot. Well, it's a lot of work. I mean, it really is for someone as experienced as he is. But Sal, I know you're a big Buck Showalter fan. Do you put any part of 2023 on him at all, or are you?
No way whatsoever. Now, I'm not saying Buck had his best year as a manager, but oh my goodness, the main reason why the Mets didn't do what everybody expected was because of Scherzer and Verlander. And you could throw in Edwin Diaz injury as well. None of that is on Buck Showalter. Is it his fault that Pete Alonso didn't have a great year offensively? Is it his fault Jeff McNeil all of a sudden can't figure out a way to hit? Is it his fault Starling Marte was banged up? Like, of all the things, Michelle, to blame on this Mets team, Buck Showalter is nowhere near the top. That being said, I do get the same sense as Tim that unfortunately it might be the end of Buck Showalter and the Mets, but this season is not his fault at all.
Okay, so we are going to do a rapid fire question game. So give me reasons to watch the Mets for the rest of 2023. So Sal, you go first. By the way, you cannot repeat, so come up with your own.
How about this? To me, it's the number one reason to watch the Mets the rest of the season. Really, the only reason why I watch the Mets the rest of the season. Gary, Keith, and Ron, best broadcast team in baseball. They are entertaining night in, night out. You never know what you're going to get. That's it for me.
Love that. Tim?
Pete Alonso, because he's got 35 home runs and 87 RBIs, which puts him on pace for something like 50 and 120 or something crazy. So even in this kind of mediocre for a little while season for Alonso, he's putting up some wild numbers. And as we discussed, that's not something you see all the time throughout the history of the Mets. So you got to enjoy these seasons when you can.
Sal?
Because, Michelle, and you know this as a baseball fan, when it's over, regardless of how the season went, you're going to miss it. Like you'll miss the baseball. And even though they stink, even though it's been disappointing, you're a fan. You're a Mets fan. You got to watch the team. And you still get, even now, I don't want to watch these games, but I'm watching Drew Smith give up a home run. It's driving me nuts. But I know I'm going to miss it come October. And I'm going to be angry watching the postseason without the Mets in it. It's going to bother me. So enjoy every game as best you can, because when it's not there, you're going to miss it for the cold winter months until next April.
That's so true. Tim?
I am really bitter that Sal not only stole my answer, but put it much better than I could have. So instead, I'll say the rookies, which maybe is a cop-out, but is along the same lines, because you have Senga, who's still a rookie, Alvarez, who's been great, Vientos, we'll see what happens the next 7 weeks. Maybe Brett Beatty comes back. Maybe Ronny Mauricio comes up. And in a baseball nerd way, which I am, which I think you guys are, at least to some degree, that's fun stuff. Whether the rookies work out or not, these guys, this is the beginning of what they're doing for the Mets. And it could be the beginning of, in a couple of cases, something really fun and really special. So part of the fun is finding out along the way.
You are exactly right. And you kind of touched on it, but I can't believe none of you guys just said the words Francisco Alvarez. There was so much hype about him coming up. And my thoughts were like, okay, I'll believe it when I see it. And like, let me wait till he's at the big league level. And even when he first came up, it was like, okay, he's good. I've loved watching his development. And I can't tell you the last time I've been this excited about a catcher. I really, really can't tell you. But that is going to wrap up our show. I have one last question for you because it is an off day. Sal, how are you going to spend your off day?
How do you think I'm working? There is no off day here. I did my radio show at 2 or till 2. I'm doing this until now. I got to rush over to the SNY studios, do baseball night in New York, and then sports night tonight. This is the anything but an off day for me today.
Does anybody have a violin? Sorry.
Hey, you asked me.
You sound so mad about it. Tim, how are you going to spend yours?
I am going to write a story about Mets pitching prospect Blake Tidwell, which everybody can look for on Newsday.com in a bit. And then I'm going to go for a run because I'm training for the New York City Marathon. So it's a full day.
Wow. Okay. Humble flex. Okay, Tim. Now we see what we're dealing with. Athlete over here.
I'm raising charity, so I got to get it in.
Love that. Love that.
Michelle, had you posed that question, like, what are you going to watch instead of the Mets tonight? I would have said, Jersey Shore, it's Thursday. Sammy Sweetheart's back. I can't get enough of Jersey Shore. So that's what I'm going to be watching instead of the Mets on this off day.
Oh, well, prayers up for your wife having to have that on in the background. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. The Nets Mets Off Day Live will be Thursday.